Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Oakes, welcome to Everything Co-op. This month is Women's History Month, and the theme for this month is Women Who Advocate for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And we're here to celebrate Liz Bailey, who is somebody that advocated for diversity, equity, and inclusion for everybody. Just a wonderful human being who we lost in January of this year. And we have several people on today that are going to celebrate with us her life and her contributions to co-op and to each one of us. And we're going to start off with Doug O'Brien. And Doug, would you introduce yourself and just go ahead and give your tribute to Liz?
Sure. Vernon, thank you. And thank you and Pat and the team at Everything Co-op for taking this special moment for Liz, who was absolutely a special person in the cooperative community. I'm the current president and CEO of National Cooperative Business Association, CLUSA International. And in the wake of Liz Bailey, who served as the interim CEO in 2011 to 2013, as well as a couple of my other colleagues here, Paul and Judy, also served in this role. And I'll mention in the context of DEI, you said she was a champion for it, which is absolutely the case, Vernon. She not only advocated for it, but she lived it. I just literally, about 4 minutes ago, walked by the wall here. I'm at the headquarters of NCBA in Washington, D.C., and we have on the wall the photos of our CEOs, the former CEOs. And I took a moment to look at those 13 photos. And the first one, who's a woman, and comes up in 2011, and it is indeed Liz Bailey. Liz was the first woman CEO, and that's after spending years as leading the Cooperative Development Foundation. Mary Griffin's going to speak to that, I'm sure, in just a moment. I'll try and be real quick here. Liz was absolutely a fantastic champion for cooperative. She had a special knack for connection, and she was terrifically politically astute and generous. And those are probably the three things that I think of when I think of Liz. Generous with her time and with her expertise and passion. She was one of the very first people that reached out to me when I joined NCBA CLUSA 7-8 years ago. And she was, particularly in that first year, but also after that, so willing to answer any call, to answer any question, to volunteer how NCBA CLUSA, how the cooperative community could be more influential, make a deeper impact. She did, many things here at NCBA CLUSA and CDF. Very recently, and Paul's probably going to talk about this, she was one of the kind of thought leaders on helping to create the international portion of the Cooperative Impact Conference that OCDC, we're so proud to partner with OCDC on that portion of Cooperative Impact Conference, and Liz has been a huge part of that. I think, just maybe ending a little bit where I started is how Liz she was absolutely a leader around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and she lived it, and she helped chart a path, I think, not only for NCBA CLUSA, but for the cooperative community writ large. She was one of those people that was in the front of the room, and she wasn't afraid to be up there. And when she was coming up through her ranks of public service and in the cooperative community, that wasn't always an easy thing, I'm certain. So we really remember her, and she was a joy. She was a great friend too, beyond being just a consummate professional. So Vernon, again, thanks for the opportunity.
So Doug, 2025, the UN has declared 2025 the year of the cooperative, and the UN did that for 2012. In 2011 is when I got to know Liz the most, because she had brought together 150 or so cooperators to the White House to talk to the White House and the staff about co-ops and what they are. And when I heard that 2025 was going to be the year of the cooperative again, I was wondering if Liz would do that again. I don't know if you had planned for that at all, but she just did a magnificent job, and I was so pleased to be in that audience and be a part of those conversations.
Yeah, I remember it well because I was in that room, not with the co-op delegation, but I was with White House or with the USDA, and yeah, you're right. 2025 is another moment that the UN has declared as International Year of Cooperative. Certainly, we're going to learn from what NCBA CLUSA and the co-op community did in 2012, and as you said, Liz had so much to do with that success of that year. So we're going to carry some of that forward, no doubt.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And I know you have to leave and you have other things to do, and I appreciate your being here, taking out the time to celebrate Liv's life with us, and the joy of working with her. Just the absolute pleasure of working with her. And now we're going to ask Roberta McDonald to introduce herself and talk about her connection with Liz Bailey.
Thank you, Vernon. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Liz Bailey Tribute Team. It's an honor to be here. I think I already explained I am channeling Liz's voice. So for those of you listening that do not remember how she spoke with this voice, she's with us now. I want to express Liz to you from a very personal, deep well of admiration and affection that I share for her with you all. I know this. Liz was my clipping service to everything co-op. I never missed a single mention about farmer. And I know, Vernon, you said introduce yourself, but I want to do it through Liz. Part of what happened in my life was joining NCBA's board and being part of the sort of change mafia that wanted to see co-ops collaborate in bigger, louder ways, marketing our co-op advantage, which I certainly was able to do as head of marketing for Cabot Creamery Co-op. And Liz kept hauling me out as the show horse of marketing and how we used the co-op advantage in everything we did to market the farmer's world-class cheddar cheese, which from Vermont, you know it, but most of the world didn't know it when I first met Liz. Thereafter, what I also want to share is my incredible affection for her. She wasn't just a networker. She was practically a conniver. She got people that she insisted work together to work together. And she was flat out pushy about it. And I love, but in this gentle, sweet smile, I can see her face right in front of us now. I also want to express to you what a giver she was. And I think of dear Jim Bailey listening in, I'm sure, Vernon, to this podcast, this Zoom, whatever it is, wherever we are now, present or future, if somebody's listening to a recording. Jim Bailey and Liz Bailey were a match set, salt and pepper. And you didn't get one without the other. And with that, you got twice the intellect, twice the editorial capacity, twice the energy, and twice the love. So I know that Jim has been somewhat diminished by losing his better half, but I want you to know that Liz has tapped each of us, Jim, to be there for you, each of us. Any way you need it, we're there. And I also want to represent Liz to you as a stalwart champion of young people. And I mean that when we worked at NCBA and during her interim role on the development of a co-op app, we finally, Wisconsin had done the database of all the co-ops. And, you know, really ahead of the curve, we put a database together on an app, but there was nobody there to use their phone the way everybody does it ubiquitously now. So that makes her a pioneer without the planes, if you get my drift. We had the wagon, we didn't have the Indians, we didn't have the military, but we had the vision. And I love her for that. And she used all young people to put it together. So, Vernon, as irritating as my voice is to me, I want you to know how much she loved absolutely every face you see in this frame. And I can't wait to hear about Michael Peck. I love Judy and Mary. And I can't tell you, Pat, what joy you brought her from everything you and Vernon pull off in this. And I am so grateful. I'm having flashbacks to Chuck Vernon, who had the first faith in all of this. And they're now together laughing at us saying, well, we'll work on the other side on getting co-ops together. So I just want to thank all of you for allowing me to be here, Vernon, and to shout out to my dear, 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 dear friend. I love you, Liz Bailey. I always will.
Jim said that he would be listening today he's at his brother's home, and they will be listening now. So Jim is listening, and I'm glad you gave a shout out to him. Okay, thank you so much, Roberta. And then also doing a shout out to Cabot Creamery in Vermont. So now we're going to, you brought out Michael Peck's name, so we're going to go to Michael Peck. Mike, would you introduce yourself and talk about your relationship, and in some cases our relationship with Liz?
Vernon and Pat, thank you so much for pulling this together. Everybody on the screen, it's a pleasure to be with you in this sacred moment. Roberta, thank you so much for the voice you have today, because I'm trying to control my tears, and I'm not doing a very good job of it. So I couldn't control my emotions about what I would say, so I wrote it down. So I'm just going to read it, and I call it a tribute to the mighty Liz. So on behalf of all the vulnerable communities Liz Bailey blessed in the hard places, through the uphill campaigns where her indomitable spirit, leadership by direct personal example, and wise counsel made all the difference between hope and despair, thanks be to Liz. We ask for grace to return the favor in serial reciprocity and in recognition of this iconic cooperative principles and highest practice mission pioneer and defender of the most inclusive cooperative faith. Thanks be to Liz. We learn most from the losses, the campaigns that led us to the barricades where we have not yet prevailed. In full nationwide 2020 COVID-19 pandemic crisis, Liz, our irreplaceable Everything Co-op duo, Vernon and Pat, and I joined forces to focus on America's most essential workers thrown into harm's way without safety nets. The first responders we embraced centered on the United States Post Office, USPS, safeguarding more than 13,000 rural postal retail locations and delivering affordable last-mile mail and package delivery services to thousands of cooperative business enterprises and their member owners through nearly 2 million rural square miles in 47 states. In the words of the Cooperative Community Coalition we formed under the banner of Co-ops for the Post Office, nothing and nobody similarly deliver for rural Americans. Throughout the nationwide pandemic crisis, the USPS surged as a critical lifeline for the millions of Americans, particularly seniors and people living with disabilities who would otherwise be forced to leave their homes for necessities like prescription medications and survival household purchases. This is particularly crucial in rural America, where the digital divide still looms, the last mile is the hardest, and where the USPS serves as the essential lifeline for both. Liz, Vernon, Pat, and I, plus other coalition members as needed, met virtually for 90 minutes as mutualist campaign organizers every Thursday afternoon without fail over a 2-year time frame. We advanced legislation on federal and state levels, advocated for policies, integrated supporting communities, and built an online presence. At every moment, Liz served as our wise guru, collaborator-in-chief, bringing the facts, editing the final products, calling in helpful witnesses, making sure the campaign stayed relevant, credible, useful. We envisioned a USPS reconstituted as a nationwide union co-op, no surprise there, with equity and democratic governance, with its over 600,000 employees already represented by 7 unions, one of the largest USA employers of our military veterans, and where minorities comprise nearly 40% of the USPS workforce. The Co-ops for the Post Office campaign advocated for a USPS legislative mandate to serve the last mile in defense of less profitable rural post offices and postal routes that might be targeted for closure, where more costly rural surcharges were added for delivery services to harder to reach zip codes. Our adversaries were, and are, the privatization hawks circling a wounded USPS, licking their chops, any form of discrimination based on geographic location grossly undermining the USPS mission to connect all Americans, and a USPS thrown to the mercy of any partisan election campaign calculus and service, threatening the good of all the people who need their USPS alive and well. Borrowing from Ted Kennedy's 1980 Democratic National Convention speech in New York City's Madison Square Garden, for all those whose cares have been our concern, the work goes on, the cause endures, the hope still lives, and the dream shall never die. Thanks be to Liz.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you. I like that you talked about, she had a way of being forceful and calm and quiet and easy, but she got it done. And an excellent writer. An excellent writer.
I'd also like to thank Pat, who called me when I was crying my eyes out when Liz passed and saved my day, saved me that day. So thank you, Pat.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Liz blessed us all. She would, particularly Women's History Month, but all through the year, she would tell us of the women that are in the co-op movement and people we ought to talk to. And she would tell us about men also, but she did like talking about the women and what they're getting accomplished. And Judy Zigwatz, I would appreciate it as a lady and a friend if you would tell us about yourself and your relationship with Liz.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Vernon, Pat, for this opportunity to celebrate, smile, remember our dear friend Liz. In preparing for this, Vernon, I was actually quite astonished to realize I knew of Liz and Jim in the 70s in Wisconsin politics, since I'm from Wisconsin politics and worked for a member of Congress. Liz probably announced that I knew her aunt, Liz Allen, who was very active in politics. So when I was preparing for this, I was astonished to realize she and I never really worked together in co-ops until the year 2013. So we leapfrogged over one another in terms of careers. I, too, served as exec director of the Co-op Development Foundation up until 2003 when I came back to Wisconsin to join governor's administration. Liz took over the foundation. Liz then became, as Doug said, interim president and CEO of NCBA CLUSA, and so in 2013, Liz reached out to me. By this time, the Democratic governor I worked for had left office, decided not to seek re-election, and she asked if I would come on as sort of senior consultant and manage the affairs of the Co-op Development Foundation while she served as the interim president and CEO of NCBA CLUSA. So it was really 2012 and 2013, and I was overseeing and working with the staff. And I have to preface, since we both are political creatures and political junkies, probably most of our time, and Paul probably has stories about this, most of our time was spent speculating on the politics, be it Wisconsin politics, and then you throw Jim into the mix, and Jim was chair of the Democratic Party at one point, or chair. And so it's a wonder that we got focused on co-op work, which we did. And Liz, I was very impressed. I stepped in, and she'd already, as a follow-on to the White House conference, she had done a series of forums at the press club to focus on how co-ops could address the needs of our seniors, both housing and then also home care. And I was asked to manage this day forum in the press club where those two issues came together and were married to look at not only, and it's fascinating, even today, I think Mary talked a little bit about housing, how critical it is. At that point, manufactured housing, which some people refer to as mobile homes, was a critical factor in terms of affordable housing for rural seniors. And so she was determined that we were going to marry these issues together, and she did it very successfully. And I have to say, I wanted to pay tribute to how focused she was on those issues and her method of bringing the co-op model to a broader audience, which is something she really was committed to doing. So by hosting the series, be it the White House Conference or a forum at the National Press Club, where we had representatives of manufactured housing builders who didn't even know about senior housing co-ops, it was the opportunity to really get the cooperative option and solution out in front of new audiences. She was absolutely committed to that. She was instrumental in creating that focus on home care and housing for seniors, and so innovative, unrelenting, and passionate. So I'm surprised in that short period of time, because we only really worked together for a 15-month period, if you will, but we stayed in touch. I sit back in amazement how I went through some of our emails, that we were able to deliver a forum while still enjoying every day the political world around us. So to Liz and Jim was listening, you guys were leaders. I met in the 70s and continued up until to this day. So thank you, and let's raise a glass at some point in honor of our dear friend Liz.
Okay, I like raising that glass. Okay. Maybe we can do that at the Capital Impact Conference, if not before. That's always in October. Okay. So we have a few minutes before we take our break, about 4 or 5, and I know, Doug, you have to leave. Do you have anything else that you would like to say before you leave?
Well, I want to leave the minutes to this august group. I do want to say one more time just what a great impact Liz had on I think the cooperative movement here in the U.S. But as people have said, on an individual basis, she was such a wonderful person, and I want to join others and lift up Jim at this moment as well, and we're all here for you, Jim. And we're living Liz's legacy right now. I can say that, and think of her every day. So, Vernon and Pat, thanks again.
Thank you, Roberta.
I want to urge Doug, and I tried to in the chat. I really think we should all storm NCBA and ensure that Liz is in the Hall of Fame. Since she can't write it for other people now, we've got to do it for her. So she belongs. This should be Liz's year. Okay. Thank you.
I hear you. Actually, Mary's more important on that one, Roberta, than me. She's it's
incorrect.
I'm with you. Good to see all of you.
Yeah, I just think we need to get somebody to write up the application for Liz to be in the Hall of Fame. She deserves it. If anybody does, she deserves it. So, yeah, we need to figure out who is going to write that up. Roberta, you're going to write it?
I'm absolutely willing to do it. It's onerous and difficult, but Mary knows, and Judy knows, and Paul knows I'll be tapping them for assistance. And now, Michael Peck, I'm on your tail too, okay? And we'll get Jim to edit it, and it'll be done. The best. Thank you.
Okay. Mary, your name was brought up. Mary Griffin, would you like to... We have about 4 minutes before the break, so would you like to start with introducing yourself?
Sure.
And talking
Sure.
about this?
And thank you, Vernon and Pat. And it's great to see everyone at this celebration of life. I think that's how we have to think about it, because she did have a life to celebrate. I worked with Liz when I was at NCBA in the 2000s. I first met her probably in 2004. And we worked on several projects, and it was a pleasure working with her on public policy, because at the time I was doing a lot of public policy work when Paul Hazen was at the helm. I mean, we're all connected. And she was really keen on elevating the voice of co-ops and the model before, as Judy was saying, a broad public audience. She came to CDF in 2003 and spent the better part of 10 years there, advocating for co-ops, raising the profile, and raising, even more important, the funds. so we could support the mission of CDF, which is to educate and develop cooperatives. She keenly understood that CDF, which is now celebrating its 80th year, is a foundation of and for the cooperative community. We support the co-op community, and the community supports us. So some of my favorite moments or memories of Liz were at the co-op 5K. With Liz, I think she had one of those bullhorns, getting everybody going at the co-op 5K. At the time, my kids were younger, but now I look back now that I'm doing the co-op 5K, and I remember being down at Haynes Point and doing the run. I always love that. And also at the Hall of Fame, organizing the Hall of Fame. Now I see from the other side what an amazing production that is. And she always did it with grace and always went off well at National Press Club. But now serving as executive director of CDF, I really appreciate her work on cooperative solutions for seniors, as Judy was just mentioning, in rural areas. She helped position CDF and, more important, co-ops to be key solutions for the home care and housing crisis we face. CDF, and this was during her tenure, did an amazing amount of support for the resident-owned communities of manufactured home parks, which are now at the forefront in terms of addressing rural housing needs for everyone, including seniors in rural areas. Now they have approximately 350 manufactured homes that are resident-owned. These are not easy to organize. There's not a lot of time, but it's been incredible. And Rock USA, the network, is always giving CDF, Liz, credit for that early support. And I've been looking at old grants and stuff, and we really provided a lot of support for that. And she also positions CDF as a national co-op development center. She was there when we got the first grant from the USDA for rural cooperative development, which just has helped support the co-op community address many of this country's needs, including home care, food insecurity, housing, and agriculture. In addition to raising the co-op voice in the public policy arena.
Excuse me, Mary.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We're going to have to take a break, and then we'll come back, and you can talk more about Liz. We'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial.
News Talk 1450 WOL AM, where information is power.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes, and the program is Everything Co-op. And today is the first day that we're on to talk about Women's History Month. And the theme this year is Women Who Advocate for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And we're discussing the life and the joy and the time of Liz Bailey and how we all knew her and what a great joy she was to work with. And she was just, as somebody said, she embodied diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's for everybody. She just did a wonderful job. And before the break, Murray Griffin, who is the executive director of CDF, Cooperative Development Foundation, was talking about Liz and her time with her. Mary, would you continue?
Sure. Thanks, Vern. As I was saying, Liz helped position CDF as a National Cooperative Development Center, and we were supported by USDA in terms of rural cooperative development grants, which has allowed us to become we, along with partners, to support the National Home Care Initiative. And this week, there's the 8th annual Home Care Conference, where 120, mostly women of color, talking about DEI, are talking about the needs and how we're addressing probably one of the biggest crises this country is facing, which is aging America. The number of people over 85 is going to increase by 184%, and we're going to be there to help with it. The sector has grown. When Liz was probably starting, there were probably 3 to 5. There are now 21 operating home care worker co-ops and 16 in different states of evolution. And if you could feel the energy at this conference right now that's happening out at CFC headquarters, the Rural Cooperative Electric Financing Corporation. But shout out to them for supporting the Home Care Worker Cooperative Conference. It's another example. There's a lot of P6, Principle 6, co-ops helping co-ops going on. And Liz would be very proud to see what the conference and what the sector is looking like. And we're positioning ourselves, we're about to transition to a secondary co-op to sustain and scale this sector more. So they're going to be prepared for what's coming, which is the biggest issue we're going to be facing as a nation the next 10 years in terms of taking care of our aging population. So she was at the forefront of that. And we're also working on housing, which is great. And she was at the forefront of that. Again, for anyone in any state, rural, urban, you're dealing with a housing crisis, and cooperatives are there to help. There's an increasing interest in cooperatives. Liz was sort of ahead of her time in understanding the role of cooperatives in addressing seniors' needs as she saw what was coming. Everybody saw what was coming, but, co-ops prepare. There's a lot of reaction that's happening in the public policy arena, but we were actually at the forefront in preparing for the tsunami of impact of the aging America. But I would be remiss if I didn't. I'll end with this memory of her, and that is because one of the things, we all talk about work, but as we all know, particularly as we age and we face people who pass, what's more important is who you are and who you spent your life with. And she spent her life with an amazing person, and they had an amazing partnership with Jim Bailey. And it was always the sweetest thing to see them together. And one of my memories is Jim and Liz dancing at Paul's, I won't say which birthday Paul, but at Paul's birthday party many years ago. And I think I have some pictures from that if I can ever dig them out. But anyways, I'll leave with that because that was such a beautiful image. And that is really what's most important in our lives. Thanks, Vernon.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. And I'll be 77 this year. So all you can do for home health care is, yes, it's for all of us because we need it. It's a big, big need. I have several friends that find it difficult to find really good home health care. And if we can get more and more co-ops, and Liz has always been ahead of her time, whether it's home health care or housing, or Cornelius Blandy was going to be on the day of the Federation of Southern Co-ops, but he turns out he's on an airplane right now, so he could not be on. But she would be down at the Federation's conferences in the South and supporting the Federation and all that they do. So right now we want to turn it over to Mr. Paul Hazen. Paul, would you introduce yourself and tell us about your life and times with Liz Bailey?
Thanks, Vernon, and thanks, Pat, for inviting me. And I'm so honored to be here to recognize my great friend Liz Bailey and talk with our colleagues about the wonderful accomplishments that she made throughout her career and life. I'm the current executive director of the U.S. Overseas Cooperative Development Council, but I've spent my career in cooperatives and focused on cooperative development. And that's the kinship that Liz and I share, both being born and raised in western Wisconsin, in rural communities, that cooperatives are the lifeblood in the fabric of those communities. And joining the interest and the impact of cooperatives with politics and public policy is something that we shared. And like others on this tribute to Liz, all of our conversations would start with talking about the political situation, whether it's local, state, or national or international, and always enjoyed that. I first got to know Jim and Liz Bailey in the late 70s in Wisconsin. We were all involved with Democratic politics, and that was my first introduction to them. I'm reminded that at one point Jim Bailey ran for the chair of the State Democratic Party of Wisconsin, and I did not support him. I supported one of the other people, and I don't know that Liz ever really forgave me for that. But she never said anything, but I think it was always something that we shared together. And Liz and Jim became great friends. And so when we all kind of came back together around cooperatives and cooperative development, it was great to reconnect with Liz and Jim and their interests. And I don't know what it is about the water in western Wisconsin, but it's not only cooperatives that's really vital. It's the development of new cooperatives to be innovative and make an impact on people's lives and make our society and our economy better. And that must have been drilled into us at some point in western Wisconsin, because there's been a number of us who have made that part of our career, and Liz certainly has exemplified that. I have said that she was my go-to person around public policy and cooperative development and cooperatives. I'm beneficiary of her constant promotion of the things that I've been trying to do in my career. I'm always surprised when someone will volunteer that Liz Bailey told me that you were doing X, Y, or Z, and I'm eternally grateful for her for that support and confirmation of what we're all trying to do. Liz, we've talked about this. Liz was a great connector and a great networker and had all the right contacts. But it was not only at the real high levels of Washington, D.C., was all levels. As was said, that she was the executive director of the Cooperative Development Foundation, and one of their fundraising activities is the Race for Cooperative Development. And so she not only, did the high policy activities, but she also did the grunt work of putting on a 5K race and making sure that was a success. And one year I was surprised to see the hair stylist that I go to was one of the contributors towards the race. And I thought, well, what is their interest in cooperatives? Well, I found out later that both Jim and Liz went to the same hairstylist. And of course, she wasn't going to let anybody get off the hook without contributing to cooperative development. And I think that's just an example of her ability to network. Oftentimes when I was looking for political contacts related to politics, Liz was my first call. She was able to network and connect, and I think that's one of her major contributions to the cooperative movement. She was not afraid to reach out to anyone. One year, the former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright was invited to be keynote speaker at the Cooperative Innovation Summit in Quebec, Canada, where people were going to be joining from all over the world. Liz saw that as an opportunity. She went to Secretary Albright's staff and worked with them to craft her speech. And after the speech, Secretary Albright is reported to have said to her staff, "Why didn't I know about cooperatives when I was Secretary of State? This would have been great." And that's the kind of impact that Liz has. And I often remember that a lot of her work was behind the scenes to influence public policy and things that we probably none of us really knew that she did, but was always that constant advocacy for cooperatives. So I just am going to miss Liz and count Jim and Liz as some of my lifelong friends, and just wish Jim all the best going forward. We're here for you, Jim, and I'm glad that you shared Liz with us and with me, so that we could enjoy her company, but also enjoy her intellect and her influence and her vision for what this world could be if we all work together.
Thank you, Paul. Paul, in OCDC, at the Capital Impact Conference, there was a whole day devoted to international. And Liz twisted my arm to be head of a panel for that. Twisting my arm from Liz was a smile. That's all she had to do. Okay. But it was also just interesting watching her put things together. She had people from all over the world on this panel, 4 or 5 people, and she just put it together, and it seemed like things were magical when she put her finger and her time to it. to make it work. And I didn't want to be in charge of a panel if we didn't have some form of a trial, of us meeting everybody and talking about it. I didn't want to just meet everybody the day that we were doing the panel. And she got all of that done. It was just an absolute pleasure to work with her and see all of the work that OCDC was doing. And that was just fascinating. So I thank you also for what you do and for the work that you have done with Liz and Jim since the late 70s. That's a bit of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Vernon. And it's interesting you bring up the Impact Conference. Just as another example of, our tendency in the cooperative movement is to look inward and talk among ourselves. And Liz really helped us take the Impact Conference to a new level and to have, as we would hope, impact on policy and on economic and social development. And so it's just a wonderful example of how she took and could lead people to go to a new level. And I think that's just a great example of many things that she accomplished throughout her career. And I'm always reminded that of again, each time, and Mary did a great job of listing many of the accomplishments at CDF, but taking the foundation to the next level, I think, is another great tribute to her life and her work.
Yes. And Pat Thornton, would you introduce yourself and talk about your relationship with Liz?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Vernon. Many of you have thanked Vernon and I for the opportunity to give your testimony about Liz. But what I can tell you is that I have very little to do with it. It was all Liz. Because Vernon sat down with Jim and went through lots of things to come up with all of her friends. But I also know from working with Liz on so many projects that I heard all of your names over and over and over again. I know somebody said when we were in prep that she heard stories about Paul and about all of the folks here. So really, it's all about you and your relationship to Liz. So Liz produced her own tribute. So the thanks goes to Liz. I first met Liz when I attended a program in Vernonstead. Many of you know that I'm the producer of Everything Co-op, but really I was just helping my cousin because Vernon and I are first cousins. I was trying to help him do his thing. That's all I was trying to do. So Vernon couldn't go to a program. He said, Patty, can you go? And I said, okay, I'll go. Well, I sat next to Liz. Now, at that time, I hadn't gotten a co-op bug. I was just trying to help Vernon. And I sat next to Liz. I was nervous. I was representing Everything Co-op in Vernon. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know much about co-ops at the time. Liz took me up under her arm. I went back to Vernon. I said, I was so glad. I sat next to Liz Bailey, and she took care of me. Well, after taking care of me and we exchanged stories and things, we immediately hit it off. And so, since I was producing, and as I said, I wasn't a part of the co-op world. Let me say this. I knew about cooperatives, but I wasn't a part of the whole community like Liz was. So when Women's History Month came up, because this was early on, I called Liz. Because when you don't know folks and you haven't gained all of that recognition and everything, people were a little hesitant to come on this program they didn't know about. So between Liz Bailey and Jessica Gordon-Nimhard, every year they would give me a list. Now, Liz not only gave me a list, as did Jessica, but she sent an email to all the people she gave me a list for. And she told them, Pat's going to contact you, and you need to be on the show, whether that was Roberta, whether that was Margaret Bow, whether that was many of our infamed people whom we've had on Everything Co-op came through Liz. And she became a true friend. She wasn't just a contact. She wasn't just a person who connected you with people. She lived it. She embodied it. She was the person who was behind the scenes, who nobody ever sees, who doesn't really care to be seen. And so in that,
if anything was coming up, periodically Liz would reach out to me and said, I think it'd be a good idea to infuse some of this. I'm going to send you an email and you can contact them. Don't worry, I'll give them a call beforehand. And by the time I would get to people, of course, I would have the Liz intro, so it was all good. I didn't have to explain anything. And so fast forward, and I can't say how much that meant, because in February of this month, the theme for Black History Month was African Americans and the Arts. And we didn't have a lot of people in our cadre of guests who wanted to address that theme. And I had to cold call all of these people. I researched on the internet. I would always research after Liz gave me the people, and I could give Vernon all the information, but I had to cold call and create these relationships. Let me tell you, it was a far cry different than following an email that Liz sent. And I really learned the value of that intro and the value of who she was and will continue to be, because all you had to do was say her name. And so fast forward to Co-ops for USPS. I won't even mention that because Michael did such a great job of that. But during the beginning of COVID, you weren't really connected. But every week I got to sit with Vernon and Michael Peck and sometimes Justin Franks. And then we had an intern to do all the graphics and things. And it was consoling because we were doing something. That was such a helpless time when you couldn't even go out or anything like that. And so Liz helped us to feel purposeful, and she helped us to do things that made a difference in the world. And I think that's all that she continued to do, was to make a difference in the world. I can say that my life and the lives of many other people has been better because Liz passed through it. And I am definitely going to deeply miss her. She was a friend. I lift my glass up to her, and I look forward to seeing her name in the Co-op Hall of Fame someday. So I thank you for the opportunity. I thank all of you for answering my call when I reached out to you and for continuing to do the work that you do. Much love to you, Liz. Much love to Jim. And know that we're always here for you, Jim. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you. Michael Peck, you talked a lot about the Postal Service. And I almost don't want to ask you this but if need be, we'll get you some tissues. What was working with Liz like for you personally?
Oh, well, that's quite a question. So in the Don Quixote paths of my life, tilting at windmills, Liz was always the person I ran the concept by first, just to find out if I was somewhere in the universe of the possible. And she always took every idea, the wacko ones and the better ones, and responded with love and a lot of research. And I grew to understand that I had to be careful what I asked Liz to do, because she was so amazing at giving that she would actually do the work. And so the request had to be worthy of her time. And she was also the biggest expert on rural America I have ever met. And all of our conversations were about, what can we do to break this false choice between rural and urban America, between coastal America and everything in the middle. Why flyover country really is a metaphor for nothing, and we need to totally change our vocabulary and the way we see everything. And she was so grounded in this and had so many good examples and context when we were trying to save the factories, the timber factories in upper Wisconsin. Margaret Bow was the lead on that. And Liz, of course, introduced me to Margaret Bow, who has got to be one of the world's greatest developers ever. The unions were sometimes being difficult, well, most of the time being difficult. Liz would just, help take the circle and draw it tighter, so that even though we didn't succeed in this particular case with 2 factories, we felt that something possible could happen the next time around. So I guess when she left, you never think anybody like Liz Bailey is going to leave your life. You just don't think like that. And you wish that you had thanked her and praised her 1,000% more than you did because now you have to do it in your thoughts. You can't do it in front of her face. The Baileys, who are amazing friends of ours, they gave their favorite squeak toy their dogs loved when their dogs passed to our standard poodle, whose name, by the way, is Poodle Lisa Peck. And that dog squeaks that toy every single night. And I am, it brings a smile to our face, especially now. Jim, you're listening, you know the toy. But it always reminds me of the gift and the friendship and the camaraderie, like Paul said, and like Mary said, living life is beyond, it's the people. It's always the people. And so I will always be giving thanks to Liz Bailey. Always.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Judy, do you have any last thoughts?
Oh, Vernon, so many. Appreciate being part of this. I could go on. I have pages. I just would conclude by her dedication and how much I enjoyed working with her. I forgot to add that I carried on some of the RCDG grant money that Mary referred to. And for months or a year, I would drive from Madison to western Wisconsin, Paul, Vernon County. We were trying to replicate see if we can move the home care cooperative from Watoma, Wisconsin into Vernon County. And Liz was so patient, and it was just, again, her vision and support to see if we couldn't extend the reach of cooperatives to our seniors. So her dedication, her humor, the smile. So just such fond memories of working with Liz and her passion.
Thank you. Thank you. Mary Griffin.
I'll just say I feel like I'm channeling Liz every day now that I'm in the position that she was in, and I just appreciate all she's done. It's great to see the foundation being laid, the case being made, and then, like the theme of the home care conference this year is taking flight and caring for the future, and that's sort of what we're doing now. And I think it's just sort of appropriate that we're at this moment. And Liz knew how well it was doing, which is nice because she was able to appreciate that. But just going to miss her check-ins. But as everyone said, generous and kind. I met with her just a couple months ago for lunch, and just, she was saying, what can I do to help? And just a lovely, lovely person. And we're all at a loss for it, but she had a wonderful life. And goodbye, Liz.
Goodbye. So, Paul, we only have a minute left. Would you like to leave us with?
Yeah, I think my tribute to her is the impact that she's had on, many, many lives, not only here, this group, but people that we don't even know that have benefited from the many accomplishments over her career and making people's lives better, and that lots of examples have been given of the work that she's done. But I think that's her legacy, and we're celebrating that, and we're going to miss her, and we just should all carry on in her spirit and go out there and let's change the world for the better in Liz's memory.
Pat?
I just want to read something from Justin. He said Liz was always very personable and kind, often reaching out to ask how things are going. I appreciated her friendly presence whenever we crossed paths, adding my condolences and shared admiration. That's from Justin Franks.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody out there. We'll see you next Thursday. Please live cooperatively.
The preceding program was paid for by Everything Co-op.